Welcome everybody. This is EA Global Summit 2020 virtual conference connecting global EA practitioners. This is Juhi from EA's Global Summit team, and we have Phil, who is principal consultant and Sparx EA expert, presenting here today, getting the best out of MDG. We have been seeing fantastic response, over 1,000 people attending this conference. We have a great lineup of speakers and sophisticated collaboration platform to give you all the best experience of attending this conference. Please log your questions for this session in Teams channel shared in your chat window. Speaker will be answering few questions in the Q&A session, but you can continue the detailed discussion after the session in Teams channel. Now over to you, Phil, and you can present your session and share your screen now, please.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Phil Chudley, and I'm presenting to you today from the sunny south coast of the UK. For myself, very, very briefly, I've been using Enterprise Architect for over 15 years, and a lot of my work is developing MDGs. The current one I'm doing is a version of a customized TOGAF Metamodel for a very large insurance company in the UK. What I'd like to do today is divide the session into two sections. One is the background components, understanding what an MDG is all about. And then the second half, I will walk you through one I prepared earlier, and also make some modifications to the MDG so you can see some live MDG modeling in Enterprise Architect. So off we go. So first of all, we're going to have a look at what an MDG is all about. Now, I expect we've got a great variety of backgrounds listening in today. So I've tried to sort of address everybody, from people who are very new to MDGs to those who maybe have developed MDGs, or those who have tried to develop an MDG and got stuck along the way. So I sincerely hope that everybody will get something out of the presentation. Look at what an MDG typically contains, and things that you can add onto an MDG to make what I call it sing and dance. Primarily, I would always put these extras in, but you can actually use an MDG without all these optional extras. Go through a workflow of how I would develop an MDG. There are various ways you can tackle it, but this is the way that works for me. Looking at a folder structure, when you develop an MDG, you are going to have a number of files present. There could be 3, there could be 30. And managing those files is crucial to success and sanity. And of course, we have an example of an MDG to share with you today. And I'll give you a demonstration of how that was put together, and as I said, to make some modifications. There will be questions and answers, and as Dewey said, those are going to be collated on the MS Teams platform. I will be answering the questions via MS Teams and also addressing some at the conclusion of today's presentation. So basically, at its heart, an MDG, which for your interest stands for Model Driven Generator, is a meta-model definition. So it defines what you can do with elements and relationships. But in addition to that, in the Sparx Enterprise Architect framework, it gives you a complete modeling environment, diagrams, toolboxes, Quicklink rules, and viewpoints, and so on and so forth. So it's more than just a meta model. What you must have in an MDG, no MDG can realistically work without a profile. However, you could create an MDG just to disseminate some common information to people, where we can have a look at the optional extras a little bit later to see how you could do that. But essentially, if you're using something like a Metamodel, you must have a profile. That profile has one or more stereotypes. These are the elements that you define that comprise your Metamodel, and those extend what is known as a meta class, a UML activity, a UML class, a EA requirement, etc. These stereotypes have one or more attributes. Now, some of these attributes are added automatically by the system, the MDG itself, under your control, of course. You put values in them, and others will simulate the tag values that will eventually end up in your stereotype. So a typical use of an element is to have an element in your Metamodel with data associated with that element, and that data is represented by tag value. And those tag value could be single text strings, drop-down lists from enumerations, or predefined tag values, as well documented in the Sparx user guide. You can also have a Shapescript. Now, I've shown that in yellow, not because it's any different to anything, but we won't have time to do a deep dive on a Shapescript. Although I will show you a Shapescript when we look at the demonstration, we won't be able to go into a deep dive. That could be a subject of another presentation in the future. There's also an icon. Now, the icon is used to identify the element in the project browser and also the toolbox. It is optional. You don't have to use it. And if you do, then you'll have to have a pixel editor which is capable of doing bitmap creations. And there are one or two little techie bits about it, and I'll explain those a little bit later on about icons. So what should be in an MDG? Well, if you just generate using a profile, you will get a free gift of a toolbox and a diagram, but those are what EA will generate for you. But ideally, you want to be in control, not EA. So you'll need one or more toolboxes. How would you assemble your elements, your relationships, and so on, your stereotypes into a toolbox or toolbox pages? Then you can associate the toolboxes with custom diagrams, and these are based upon the diagram types that Enterprise Architect already has defined. These diagrams will appear on a list when you add a new diagram to your repository. The extra things. Now, if you've struggled with MDGs in the past, and I mean prior EA 13 or 14, you will have known that to do the Quicklink rule, that is when you connect element A to element B on a diagram, you had to go through some horrendous CSV file, and it was a pretty tough task to get it working. I know, been there, got that t-shirt. But luckily, it's much, much easier now in version 14, 15, and so on. And it uses a series of relationships called meta relationships, stereotype relationship, and a meta constraint. We'll go through the difference in a little while, but briefly, a meta relationship allows you to relate rules that are for existing relationships, like a UML association, UML generalization. A stereotype relationship allows you to define Quicklink rules of your own relationship stereotypes. I always use my own relationship stereotypes. I never use the built-in ones. I will justify that for you in just a little while. And a meta constraint closes a loophole. If you use a stereotype constraint and you use the Quicklink, you will get valid relationships. But you can override that by using the toolbox. A meta constraint closes that loophole. So if you use a combination of stereotype and meta constraint, you will be able to control exactly and precisely what relationships can be created between element A and element B on diagram C, thereby raising the consistency and quality of your models. A view specification is a new initiative, and I rather like this. It allows you to take a diagram which has got a toolbox associated with it and then filter it down. So if you don't want all of your meta model exposed at one time, you can have a viewpoint approach, rather like what Archimate does. And you can present various bits which only are relevant to that viewpoint that you are indeed exposing at that time. The optional extras, which I will not go through in this presentation, are you can have resources encapsulated into an MDG. Images, automation scripts, predefined searches, all your templates for docgen, code generation, and model-driven architecture transformation, workspace layouts, and model views. I think model views are tending to be deprecated now by some of the more advanced features in the browser in EA 15 and 15.2. Model wizards, again, that's in yellow. You may have observed that when you switch on a perspective or you create a new project and you use a model wizard, you'll get a set of patterns with some explanatory text beside them. You can put that into your own MDG, but, and here is the but, it won't work in the custom builder, which we'll see later. You'll have to do some manual manipulation of some of the files that comprise the MDG. So it can be done, although, again, I won't have time to do it today. Perhaps that's a topic we can pick up in MS Teams for those who are interested. So here's a workflow. First of all, you must define the meta model. Now, the meta model may already be defined for you, but this comprises of which element do you want? What is it based upon? What tag values do you want in there? What type are those tag values? And most importantly, what relationships and viewpoints are you going to use with the meta model? Once that has been done outside EA, you've got to make sure that you have a perspective which includes the MDG technology builder provided by Sparx Systems. It makes life a lot easier. Create your new repository using the MDG technology wizard. Define any tag values. These tag values are defined in the UML types for your repository, and then you'll be able to use them. Define them before you try to do any modeling. Define your enumerations for your drop-down lists. Of course, those two stages may not be required. Then, for each element in your meta model, you add a stereotype to the profile diagram. Now, the stereotype doesn't have to be unique throughout the entire universe of EA, because the stereotype you choose will have a prefix of the MDG ID you choose. I'll just highlight that for the moment. Then, for each element in the meta model, you add your tag values and optionally your Shapescript. And then you can repeat that process for relationships. You can define your own relationships. Once you've got all your elements and your relationships defined as stereotypes, you build your toolbox or toolboxes and all their pages. Define diagram or diagrams to use these toolboxes. Save the profile and toolbox and diagram. Generate using what is known as an MTS file. We will go through the generation process in the demonstration section. test the MDG, define the Quicklink rules. Now I'm saying define the Quicklink rules after you've tested the MDG. Personally, I find it's more efficient to get the look and feel of the element right first. Then we can deal with the links. Of course, if you're confident, you can find the Quicklink rules and view specs, then you can test it. Yeah, you can reverse those two should you so desire. And then again, retest, and then you go through an iterative process of making changes and corrections. To add the extra goodies, that is the meta relationships and the stereotype relationships and so on, we can do that once we know the Quicklink rules work. And you do that as by diagram, as you'll see in a moment. Define the view specs, save it all, regenerate, retest, and then you're ending. So that's the basic workflow. But one thing I found over the years and experience is how you structure all the files that you're going to create. In the workflow, you've seen profile, toolbox, diagram, MTS, MDG. That's at least 5 files. Typically, you have many more. So here is a recommended structure. This is the structure I use, and I find it works for me, keeps me nice and organized. What I do is I have a folder called XYZ MDG. Under that, I have 2 subfolders, one of the images and one for the XML files. I also have the MDG itself. I use EAPX files, but you can use Firebird if you prefer. And then I also have a separate repository for the testing. So I always have this pattern. Inside the XML folder, this is where I do a nice little trick for myself. I prefix each file name with the name of my MDG. So in the example you see before you, my MDG is PRC_MDG. Then I suffix it with what it's being used for. So if it's a profile, _profile, the toolbox, etc. This allows me to pick up the right file at the right time. And you'll see how important this is when we go through the generation of an MDG. So in order for me to prepare you for a demo, let's just have a look at what it would consist of, just diagrammatically, so I can explain the various parts to you. It's easier to see it in a PowerPoint slide than perhaps on my small screen for EA, but you will see it in both frameworks. So it's a very, very, very simple meta model. We have a cause of a problem which is solved by a solution. So we have 2 relationships, origin of, solved by, and a problem and solution can have self relationships. A problem can be made up of problems, and a problem can generalize a problem. Similarly, a solution can be made up of solutions, and a solution can generalize a solution. The colors I show you there are deliberate. So I want to show you how you can use colors within the MDG whilst retaining the flexibility of allowing your users to change the colors if you want. If you don't want the users to change the color, I will give you some tip on how to do that. The tag values I'm going to have in here are the cause details, which is a memo, the date identified, which is a date, and I'm going to have a common tag value in the cause, the problem, and the solution called a ticket status, which is an enumeration. So here is the profile, and this is the one I'm going to show you in action in a few moments' time. So I'm basing my elements on class, the meta class, which is standard UML class. You'll notice there is an attribute here called underscore hide UML links of type Boolean, which is assigned true. This allows you to control precisely the quick link. If you do not put this attribute in, you will get your quick links and the UML. You don't want the UML ones. Well, let's assume you don't want the UML ones. Then you must put this minus hide UML links colon Boolean equals true. You must put it in. Otherwise, your quick link menus will look messy. I've used what I call a common base. On the previous slide, you saw one tag value was replicated in all three elements. So to save duplicating those tag values, simply I can put them in a common base area and inherit it. So the problem, solution, and cause all inherit this. Not only can they inherit the tag value, they can also inherit a Shapescript as well, if and only if the Shapescript's identical in all subclasses. I think that's obvious, really. Notice I've color-coded using F4 and the color background in EA, the colors I want for these elements. Now, if you do this in the profile as shown here, your user can still use F4 to override and change the colors. If you do not want them to do that, then put the color inside the Shapescript. There's a command in the Shapescript which is called set fill color. You set it to the RGB value. In this example, of course, I can't do that because I've got a common Shapescript. If you wanted to hard code the color in the problem, the solution, and the cause, you must duplicate this Shapescript. The choice is yours. It really depends on what you wish your users to be able to do. The icon is optional and it's hard coded. The path is hard coded. So this means that if you give your MDG repository to a colleague, they must have the same path to the icons, otherwise the icons just won't work, or they reset the path. So that is important. That path is an absolute path to where your images are located. Now, I'll go back one. The reason why I choose to do my own association, my own generalization, is simply A, I can call it what I want, which makes sense to my meta model. But most importantly, I can control what appears on the menu. That's the Quicklink menu, which is the meaning forwards and meaning backwards. If I use a generic UML association, I'm forced to choose what EA has chosen for me in UML, which may be fine. You may want that. But I like to have a bit more control, so I create my own association and my own generalizations, my own compositions and things. I also found, now this may have been corrected, that when I used a meta relationship and I specified generalization composition on myself, it didn't work, but a stereotype relationship certainly does. So toolbox page, really, really simple, except, gotcha. How do you know where the order of the toolbox page is? That's a rhetorical question, by the way, for you. How do you know which one's going to appear at the top and which one's going to appear at the bottom? Well, the answer is, bizarrely, it's ordered as the Z order. And the bottom is the toolbox at the top. So the toolbox page with the lowest Z order is at the top. And so here's a tip, which I picked up from another colleague, by the way, another EA user. is if you overlap these very, very slightly, so you put that and overlap it like that, you will see the stacking order, and then it'll give you a clue as to how they are going to be ordered. It doesn't usually present a problem with developing an MDG unless you add extra pages subsequently in a further iteration, and you find the order can be a little bit compromised. Oh, sorry, going too quick there. The diagram profile, very, very easy. It's simply you just choose a diagram you extend. I tend to use the logical diagram or the custom diagram. In this example, it's a custom diagram. The elements there, the p-data, style, exemption, I will explain to you later, but essentially they are set by the MDG according to what you want as preferences. So that just sets the diagram appearance, title, frame, and so on. The stereotype relationships. Now, a stereotype relationship defines a quick link. So basically, you draw a relationship which mimics the metamodel. So here we have a stereotype relationship, which is a self-generalization. We also have the relationships from problem to solution, which is solved by, and so on. Now, you notice the comment I've just highlighted on the PowerPoint slide. You can create one gigantic great diagram of all of your elements and all of your quick link rules. However, even in this very, very simple example, I've got one diagram per quick link. So I say, let's look at problem. Let's now see what problem links to as the source. Don't try and mix source and targets up. It doesn't, you'll get in a mess. Same with cause, same with solution. So one diagram for each. It doesn't take much longer, but it's far easier to maintain it. Really, really is far easier. I also do the same on my meta constraints. Now here's a gotcha, which I found the other day. The meta constraints are quite interesting because they allow you to say what is a valid source and or what is a valid target. Now you'll notice, or if you remember my meta model, a generalization was a self. So you may be tempted to say, oh, generalization, this is a valid source and a valid target because a problem could generalize itself. Generalization, source is also, solution is also a valid source and a valid target. Won't work. Because if you draw a generalization between problem and solution, problem is a valid source, solution is a valid target, you break your meta model. So what I would advise you do is stipulate your targets in your stereotype relationship. What am I targeting? You saw that on the previous slide. And in your meta constraint, just confine yourself to what are the valid sources. Then it should work fine for you. Of course, there may be situations which you find yourself in where you do need to do these kind of cross-cutting relationships, and it may be a little side effect that works for you. But generally, what I've just said is what works for me. I keep it nice under control. And again, one diagram per meta constraint. So the final slide is going to be on view specs. Now, view specification is quite easy. What you do is you extend a diagram that you created earlier, and that is extended as a view spec. And the view spec just exposes, with an exposed relationship, what it has visible in its own bespoke toolbox, like the diagram you see in front of you. Okay, so now let's switch to Enterprise Architect, and let's go through a few things practically. So I'll just minimize that, go into Enterprise Architect, and what I'm going to do first is just go through creating the wizard, right? Creating an MDG via a wizard. Now I mentioned perspectives. Here is a perspective. So here's my perspective for EA Global Summit. This is what I find works. Basic UML terminology, class modeling, because your profile diagram is a variation of a class diagram. The MDG technology builder. So those three are what you'll need to build the MDG. Once your MDG is built, and we'll show that to you in a moment, you can then add it to your perspective. So there we see it's already ready to go. So that's what you'll need to do to create a perspective to enable you to model MDGs. Of course, you could use an all perspective. I always use my own perspectives. I like to keep things simple and under my control. So if we create a new local project here, let's just call it empty for now, empty MDG, like that. And on code engineering, does it really matter what language your elements are in the Metamodel? No, it doesn't. I have a habit, if I'm not generating code, I always set my code generation to none, but that's just me. That's just the way I use EA. So now if we add a wizard to this, you'll see here are the MDGs, and there are two. One's called a starter and one's called a basic. Now the starter, it gives you elements ready to go and a few hints and tips on the diagram. Yeah, you can go for that. Personally, I find it a little bit irritating because all I'm going to do is delete the stuff that EA creates. So I use the basic template, which is purely the structure. So if I create the pattern, here is the first gotcha. It says here technology name. This is important. It may not sound it, but this is crucial. You've got to choose a name which is used for your MDG, and it identifies it uniquely throughout the entire EA framework. That means you can't use TOGAF, you can't use things that have already been used. So you've got to make sure your name is unique. So if you use your initials or your company name, then you've got a pretty good idea it's going to be unique. It should be, and I haven't tested this out recently, but I do know in version 9, 10, and 11, this must be less than 12 characters. And it must agree with the ID that is used when you generate the MDG, which you'll see in a little while. They've got to be aligned. The reason they have to be aligned is because they identify your tag values from anybody else's. And if they don't align, your tag values will not work as memo, date, and things. So if you find your tag values are not working, it's because basically the ID you generated the MDG with is not the same as when you created the model in the first place. So if I just use demo for here, like that, you'll notice what you get is a structure. So you get a profile package, a diagram profile package, and a toolbox profile package. So that's what you get as a starter for 10. Okay. So let's fast forward. This is what I did earlier. And the reason I'm not doing this absolutely live is purely to do with time constraint, but I have factored in some modifications for you. So what we got here is the profile. Now you'll notice there's a whole barrel load of stuff under here. Loads of diagrams, one diagram for constraints, one diagram for meta constraints, and so on. Why didn't I put those into packages and make it all nice and neat? Why don't I put my meta classes and my stereotypes in separate packages? Well, I found it doesn't work. I found the only way to generate an MDG reliably, and please, if anyone is out there and has got a different experience, then please share it with us on MS Teams or in the future. I found that sub-packages don't work. And when it puts it all in one package, yeah, it works perfectly. So that is why that package looks rather unwieldy. The diagram profiles, well, I only tend to use one, and the toolbox. If you have more than one toolbox profile, then yes, EA will put the diagrams underneath that, one diagram per toolbox. That's fine. And then finally, I have enumerations are fine as reusable elements, fine in their own library. And you see there, I flagged it as a namespace, so I can easily locate it. So let's go into here. You saw this earlier in the PowerPoint slide. So if I open up the problem and I right click and edit with Profile Helper, this is what you'll see when you create an element from the beginning. So if you created an element from the beginning, you will choose a name, the stereotype name. If it's an element or a relationship, choose what it's based upon. The meta type is actually the default name that you use when you go to the toolbox. So when you say, I want this element, you put it on a diagram, it says it's going to be problem 1. Strictness. Now, I haven't set the strictness on here, but I'll go through the options. What it allows you to do is control whether a user can add a supplementary stereotype. So your stereotype is called problem. If you don't control it, a user potentially could add a secondary stereotype. And as you probably know, EA can handle multiple stereotypes. It may have some undesirable side effect, it may not. So if you put it onto all, no user will ever be able to use a stereotype other than the one you've got there. They can't add it or modify it. I've got a feeling as I've used generalization, I've inherited all from the stereotype. Size X, size Y, I wouldn't really bother because EA will give you a default size if you want. Here is your icon. And as you can see, it is a hard-coded path. Tag values. Tag values are really easy. All you have to do is right-click, add a tag value. This will allow you to add a single line of text tag value. Add a specialized tag value. This will allow you to pick an enumeration, a predefined tag value, one that you defined earlier. Now, I didn't show you how to define a tag value because I'm assuming, rightly or wrongly, you know how to do that. You can also create tag groups. So if you've got a large number of tag values, you may want to put them into groups. That's fine, nothing wrong with that at all. Shapescript. Now, there's no Shapescript here because I'm inheriting the Shapescript. Before I look at the Shapescript, let's look very briefly at a stereotype for a relationship. This is pretty much identical to what you saw earlier, with one exception, and this is going to be really cool for you. How many of you have ever said, oh, why can't I set a default, global default to orthogonal square? Or why can't I set a default to orthogonal rounded? because it's not there in the options. No, other line styles are, but the orthogonals aren't. So another motivation of creating your own stereotype relationship is to set a default line style. Yay! So here we have a direction, source to destination, which will put the arrow on for you. Line style, you can set your stereotype to default to a line style. Yeah, that's meaning forwards. If you draw Quicklink from source to target, it will say origin of. If you draw it target to source, it will say originates at. So this is what you'll see on the Quicklink menu. Okay. Apart from that, not a lot to say. You can have Shapescripts on relationships. So here is a Shapescript. Now, I won't go through this in any shape or form, pardon the pun. But what I've done, I'll just highlight some salient features. These are the default globals. So it tells you what the alignment is, whether you want to use drop shadows or not. And this is made up of what are known as sub-shapes. So I've got a def size, and this bit here from line 8 to line 19 controls the rectangle notation. So if it's rectangle notation or not, I can change the appearance, rather like an actor changes in EA. And finally, down the bottom is the decoration for the composite element. Okay. Now, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We're not getting short, but I do want to save time to show you a really cool Shapescript cheat. So I'm building that up for you. So that's that. So essentially, that's all put together as it is. The relationships you saw in the relationships constraints you saw in the PowerPoint slide, and I explained those through to you. So let's now generate this. Now, the generation is a little bit quirky. And once you've got proficient at it, you'll get pretty much into an automated rhythm. This process I'm going to show you can be automated by writing your own scripts to do so. I haven't yet done that, but it's on my to-do list. I know a number of colleagues have done that, people I know on the Sparx forum, for example. The first thing I'm going to do is save the toolbox, and you open the diagram. Open the diagram for the toolbox, and then on the specialized ribbon, publish tech and publish the diagram as a profile. Don't publish the package as a profile. Diagram as a profile. Now, gotcha. When you do this in a brand new MDG, that profile name will not be present. You must add the name of the diagram in there. So my diagram is PRC MDG. If you had more than one toolbox diagram, they will have different names. So please definitely use the name there. The version number, I believe, should be consistent with when we generate it. I always make it the same. If you've used colors, you can do that. Save that. Now, the first time you do it, you'll have to navigate to the file to generate it. Repeat the process with the diagram, which is also published as a diagram profile, filling in the profile name, or the MDG name. That's done. And finally, we can publish the profile. Now, once that's published as a package, and this time the entries are completed for you. Like that. Cool. So once we've done that, we now generate it. So we generate it and click next. And I always use an MTS file, which if it's the first time you're doing this, you will create one from scratch. So I've already got one here. This is a this dialog. It also has a few gotchas. The technology, free text, that is what appears in the description in the list of all MDGs. This is the link path to your MDG file. That ID there must be the same as what you used to create the project in the first place. I mentioned that earlier. Version, you can use whatever version you like. It doesn't change every time you regenerate. Should you change it each time you regenerate? Yeah, I guess you could. And then you'll need a note. Now, the compulsory fields, the ones that must be completed, are what you see in front of you. The icon, the logo, and the URL, you can let EA handle those as defaults. If you don't happen to fill in any of those, clicking next will tell you you've missed a field. It doesn't tell you here which are the compulsory ones. I just told you that's what it is. Next. Depending on what you want to include in your MDG, you have profile, diagram type, toolbox, tag values. Here are all the optional extras I mentioned when we looked at the PowerPoint slides. Okay. Now keep your wits about you. Read what it says. It says, choose the file for the profile. This is why I put a suffix on my file name so I know exactly what file it is, because they're all listed here. Get the wrong one, EA will not say, this is wrong. It just generates rubbish. So, a bit of a management, bit of forward planning pays dividends. Exactly the same with diagram. So the sequence is profile, diagram, toolbox. But always keep your eye out, especially if you're doing this for the first time. The tag values. Any predefined tag values you have created will be listed here, and then you just simply put them over here. Okay, then next, and it's finished. Now, all that's done is it's generated the MDG. It has not made it available. So very briefly, you click Manage Tech, Advanced, and then add the path to where your MDG file has just been generated there. Okay, click OK. That will now load the MDG. It will load it when EA reloads. So if you've modified it, you may have to start EA again to reload the new version. So we generated it. So does it work? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that is to test it. So here, that's my profile. Hang on, sorry. Let me just change my EA file and open up the tester. Apologies for that. Okay, so here is my tester. If I right-click, add a diagram, you'll see PRC example, and there are my 3 viewpoints, as defined in the PowerPoint slide, which you saw earlier. So if I open example, you see cause, problem, solution. I put a cause out, I put a problem out, I put a solution out. Okay. The Quicklink is going to work, and there is the Shapescript activating on its rectangle notation. Quicklink across here says origin of. So that's the origin of, and a problem is solved by a solution. Okay. If I try to put a solve by across there, it comes up with an error. This is the effect of the meta constraint. Without that, you can cheat. So that now works. So everything is working fine. So you say, well, what about the viewpoint? Okay, right click, open the diagram and choose a viewpoint. Problem and cause only shows problem and causes. Okay. And then again, you can filter the relationships as well. So that now works. Okay. So what I'd like to do is show you how you can modify the MDG, which will give you more of an instruction of how you can do this for first principles. So let's go back to my MDG builder here, which is this one, okay? So let me now go into my profile here. I'm going to just zoom out ever so slightly. And what I'd like to do is to add a brand new element called a project. But I want to use a different Shapescript for this. So I simply go into the profile toolbox if it's not visible. Take profile helpers, and I can add a stereotype. Okay, so I'm going to add a stereotype. I'm going to call this project, and using my Quicklink, I'm going to, well, I should be able to use a Quicklink. It doesn't work, so I just go up there and use extension. So that just showed you in EA 15.2 there is a Quicklink bug in the MDG that should be available on the Quicklink. If it's not, it's extension. So what I'd like to do now is to put a Shapescript in here, but not just any Shapescript. Then once you've mastered your own MDG, your thoughts will turn to, well, someone's asked me, can I create a variety of Archimate? Can I modify BPMN? Can I modify SysML? The answer is yes and no. Sure, you can take an existing Archimate element, use a generalization, and add tag values to it. But you will inherit all of the Archimate behavior, all of the Archimate Quicklink. So you can't create Quicklinks between your Archimate element and your own element. It can be a little bit messy. If you use BPMN, the same thing applies, but there's a gotcha, which I found the other day. You create your own version of a pool or a lane, and you put them on your own diagram. Pools and lanes look identical, absolutely identical. They only look different if you use a BPMN 2.0 collaboration or process diagram. There's obviously something funky going on in the background, because I couldn't get them to look different because they both extend the same thing, which is our activity partition. Gotcha. SysML is even worse because it doesn't have Shapescripts. It's what is known as an MDG extension. And there's all sorts of wacky stuff going on behind the scenes to control the frames of internal block diagram, to control the part and property referencing with the part association. It just is a nightmare. So I've never, thankfully, ever needed to do that. So if I'm asked, and I get asked frequently, I want to use Archimate within my own Metamodel. So what I do is I clone it. Now this is quite easy. So you say, well, that's it. Okay, you can clone it. It's just a rectangle. But how do I get that little symbol in the top left corner, in the top right corner? Watch this. Here is the Archimate XML file, which I've opened in a browser. It must be opened in a browser. So I've just got an absolute file path to my Enterprise Architect extension here, installation rather, and I've just pointed it at the Archimate XML file. And here is the Archimate entry for the Stereotype business actor. And here, image to image, there is the Shapescript. And you think, well, that's useful. Not, because I can't understand one word of that. And indeed you can't. But bear with me. Right click and copy that to the clipboard. Okay. Now let's add an attribute to the project. And let's call it underscore image, like that. And in the initial value, we paste that binary gobbledygook as the initial value, right? Okay, now, if we right click and we say edit a profile helper, we click Shapescript, look what we got. Hey, we've decompiled the Shapescript. How cool is that? So now, not only can you make your Archimate element look like an Archimate element, you can look at all the tricks. How on earth did they get the actor? Oh, that's how they did it. How do they get the composite as a decoration? Ah, that's how they did it. So yeah, I mean, there are other ways of decompiling a Shapescript, yes, but that way I find is the easiest. No special external binary decoding tools or anything. It's just simple copy paste, bang, and it works. But it only works if you open the XML file in a browser. Okay, so we've now got our element here, which is our project element here. So now all we need to do is to go into our toolbox here and add the toolbox in here. Now, I haven't got any relationships set up, so let's see what we'll do in a moment. Edit a profile helper, and then add the stereotype, which we just created, called the project, like that. Give it a name, project, like that. Cool, okay. So that's now set up the project. So we've just about got enough time to set up another stereotype in here. So I'm going to add another stereotype using the helper. I am going to call this implements. It's going to be a connector extension, and it's going to be an association. And then I'm going to set the direction from source to destination and the line style to orthogonal square. And then the meaning forwards, implements, and then, sorry, and then here, implemented by, next, finish. So that has done that. Okay, a little bit quick, but you know, this is being recorded, so you should be able to watch it back. So we got our implements, we got our association. We haven't got any Quicklink rules. So that's okay. If I say the problem is problem to project. So if I go into my relationships here, I have one for the problem. So here is problem. If I now reuse my project as a link, like this, and I say Quicklink down to here, and I want a stereotype relationship. So how do I set this part stereotype equals PRC MDG : whatever it is? I simply double click, go to the tags, and there you'll see stereotype. but you must type the fully qualified stereotype. By that I mean your MDG prefix, colon, the name of your item that you have just created. No, you can't navigate to it. Yes, you must get the typing correct, including the case. So if anything goes wrong with your quick links, it's invariably going to be a typo here. So just checking implements, yeah. For sake of argument, I might as well do the meta constraint as well. The meta constraint, yeah, I can do that quite easily. So if I add a new diagram in here, and I want a UML class, I'll change the name to be meta constraint implements, like that. And then if I go down and find my implements here, implements here, this, and I want to specify what the source is. So that is the problem. So I'll take problem out here, again, as a link, like that. And use meta constraint. Double click, again using the tag values, set the UML role to source. You will notice that you will get obviously the existing relationships that already exist. In case you haven't spotted it, when you're using an MDG and you're creating relationships and links on separate diagrams, you may observe that some of your other diagrams get corrupted with all these relationships. So don't forget the really cool feature in EA15 called hide the visible links, which I'm just going to open up my thing. It's the invisible links. It's on the diagram. It's on the diagram properties, which is the invisible links, which is here on connectors. So freeze visible. So once you've defined your profiles, freeze the visible and you won't get all these constraints appearing on the diagram. Yeah, been there, done that. So now I'm just simply going to save all my diagrams, and I've just about got time to rebuild my MDG by resaving everything except the diagram. I didn't change that. So open up the toolbox, publish as diagram, save. Ka-ching. Get the profile as a package, save, override. Good. Generate the MDG using the MTS, which is that one. I'll click quickly through because nothing's changed. And then if I close EA, restart EA, it was taking a while to load. Then there is my project looking like an Archimate actor. Now the project was there. I can't remember. It's a problem, wasn't it? I can't remember which one it was now. Problem to project. For some reason, my Quicklink doesn't work. Very good demonstration. It doesn't show it. I know why. Now, this is a very good opportunity. This is going to happen to you. It happened to me. I don't know if anyone out there can spot why the Quicklink doesn't work. Well, the Quicklink doesn't work because it's not in the toolbox. Simple mistake to make. And yeah, I was looking at the time. I do have time to correct it. So I'll just go back and correct it. It will only take me a moment or two. So if I go back to my MDG here, and then I go in here, and pick up the toolbox here, add into the relationships the new relationship which I created, which was the implements there. It was actually, although it was a mistake, it is actually quite instructive because it shows you what will happen when you get errors, and it shows you how you can resolve them. So, quick way to just rebuild this like that. I say you get into a bit of a swing of these things, which you can quickly run through this. Yes, I will be scripting this in the future. And then generate, coaching that. The other mistake you can make from time to time is simply to pick up the wrong MTS file. Doesn't happen that often, but you can override or reuse the wrong MTS file. If you do happen to choose the wrong MTS file, EA will very usefully give you a warning. It knows. So now, hopefully, we can, yes, implemented by. So there we are. There's the implemented by. And there is the class. We've added it. So I hope that wasn't too rapid. But as a bonus for you, what I have done, and I done for you, is on the MS Teams. If I very just quickly open up the MS Teams, this is the MS Teams area for this session. And as you can see, I've uploaded the EAP files I've been using for this demonstration. Not only this, but also the test. It doesn't include the project I just added, though. I did that live for you. It also includes the PowerPoint slide pack and all the images that I've used here. So all the images are there. And also as you'll see if you explore this area, I've also uploaded all the XML files. If you'd like to use this, and please feel free to download it and play around with it, use it, you will have to rebuild it to your own local paths. You will have to change the icon paths to where you downloaded the images to. All right. So that's the only thing you will need to do. You can't just use it out of the box because of the hard paths. But hopefully you can have a look at that, have a fun with it, have played with it. So I have put all those resources up there. I've come to pretty much the end of the demonstration as far as Enterprise Architect is concerned, and the MDG. So I hope it's met your expectations this afternoon, this morning, this evening. We do have, I think, about 5 minutes or so left. So if we can ask any immediate questions for these 5 minutes, I'll be more than happy to do so.
Thank you, Phil. So we have a couple of questions already started posting in Teams as well, and and I have picked very few questions for you to answer over here, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. The first question is, could you talk about the pros and cons of using predefined tagged values for enumerations?
Okay. Yeah, if when you use a predefined tag value for an enumeration, you will basically define it in the type equals enum default values and so on. That works very well, and also it enables you to create it in one place. The disadvantage would be that when you add the tag value into the element, you could only have the choice of one name, and that's the name in the predefined tag value. So the enumeration becomes less or potentially less reusable, unless, of course, you always want to use the same name. Now, say, for example, you had a yes/no tag value, and that could be used by 15 different attributes within your stereotype. You couldn't use a predefined tag value. If you use enumeration, it's automatically reusable, because when you have an enumeration, EA asks you what name would you like to give to the enumeration. So you can choose as many different names as you like and reuse the enumeration multiple times in the same stereotype. The other thing about enumeration, very briefly, I always have a default value called undefined and set that as the default. The reason is this will force anyone who's modeling with my MDG to change the tag, to change the enumeration. And I could run a report using the docgen to say who hasn't changed the tag value. Because if you set a default, you can't say who's chosen the default explicitly or by default. So if you have a default of undefined, you have to change it. So reusability is the answer why you would have an enumeration over a predefined.
Okay, thanks, Phil. And the next quick question is it necessary to use only class while defining meta class? From Samiksha.
No, it's not. No, the only reason I use class is because it was closest to what I wanted to do. Another common one, you can use an EA requirement. EA, you can use activity, you can use absolutely anything within the EA main base from UML. You can use an attribute as well. Although I showed elements, you can also define stereotyped attributes. And when you put an attribute in the toolbox and you drag and drop it, it'll have the same properties. So it will drag onto the actual element and become an attribute. So yes, you don't have to use class by no means. No, of course not. The other thing about it is if you don't have an icon, then whatever your meta class is, that icon will show in the toolbox. You may have spotted that in the Archimate actor that I used, which was a class, because I hadn't got an icon for that. It just used the icon for the class. So no, it just happened that mine were classes, but I use activities quite commonly. I've even used provided and required interfaces, the lollipop and socket. I've used those as well. So no, you can use anything that's defined.
Okay, thank you so much, Phil. And I think we can wind down the session over here, and we can continue the Q&A sessions in MS Teams as posted in the chat window. There are already a bunch of questions waiting for you, Phil, over there, and we were responding on your behalf, saying that Phil will be addressing these questions shortly.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks once again, Phil. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, and thank you all. Yeah, thank you all participants for joining the great session. The video of this session will be made available post-conference, and we will be notifying you all once it is available. As requested earlier, join MS Teams and continue the conversation with Phil and other EA experts too. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye.